I never thought my first real combat mission would end with me being called into the commander's office. Not for a medal, not for recognition, but for what they called reckless deviation from protocol. My name is Jake Anderson, and at 19 years old I was the youngest pilot in my squadron, stationed at Naval Air Station Oceana in Virginia Beach. The year was 2018, and I had just completed my training to fly the FA-18 Super Hornet. Everyone told me I was too young, too inexperienced, too eager. They said I needed to learn patience, to follow orders, to respect the chain of command. But that October morning, when everything went sideways over the Atlantic, none of that conventional wisdom mattered anymore. The day started like any other training exercise. The Virginia coast was shrouded in early morning fog, the kind that rolls in thick from the ocean and makes everything feel muted and distant. I remember standing on the tarmac at 500 hours, breathing in the salt air mixed with jet fuel, feeling my heart pound against my rib cage. Lieutenant Commander Reeves, our flight leader, was briefing us on what was supposed to be a routine intercept drill. We were simulating a response to unidentified aircraft approaching the carrier strike group positioned about 200 miles offshore. Standard procedure: maintain formation, follow the leader's commands, execute by the book. "Anderson," Reeves had said, looking directly at me with those steel-gray eyes that had seen more combat than I could imagine, "you stick to my wing like glue. No improvising, no hot-dogging. This is about discipline and coordination. Understood?" "Yes, sir," I responded, standing straighter, trying to project confidence I only half felt. The other pilots, most of them in their late 20s and early 30s, exchanged glances that I pretended not to notice. I knew what they thought. Baby face, fresh out of flight school, probably going to freeze up or make a rookie mistake. I'd heard the whispers in the ready room, seen the subtle eye rolls when I asked questions during briefings. Being the youngest meant constantly proving yourself, and the proving never seemed to end. My journey to that moment had been anything but conventional. I'd enlisted in the Navy at 17, with my parents' reluctant permission, driven by a dream that had consumed me since childhood. While my high school classmates were planning college visits and prom dates, I was studying aerodynamics and military history. My father, a retired Army sergeant, had warned me that the military wasn't like the movies, that it was hard work, sacrifice, and long stretches of monotony punctuated by moments of intense pressure. He was right about all of it, but he didn't understand that I wasn't looking for glory, I was looking for purpose. Flight school had been the most challenging experience of my life. The academic workload was crushing, the physical demands were exhausting, and the pressure to perform perfectly every single day wore down even the most confident candidates. I'd watched classmates who seemed far more qualified than me wash out, unable to handle the stress or the complexity of modern fighter aviation. There were nights when I lay awake in my bunk, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake, if I was in over my head, if I'd ever truly belong in that elite world. But something kept me going. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was genuine talent, or maybe it was just the refusal to quit that my father had instilled in me from childhood. Whatever it was, I made it through, graduating near the top of my class, despite being the youngest by almost 2 years. The day I received my wings was one of the proudest moments of my life, standing there in my dress whites, while my parents pinned the gold insignia on my chest. My mother cried, my father smiled with quiet pride, and I felt like I'd finally proven I belonged. Arriving at Oceana had been another adjustment entirely. Flight school was one thing, but joining an operational squadron was something else. These weren't instructors evaluating students anymore. These were combat-experienced pilots who would be trusting me to cover their backs in real situations. The weight of that responsibility was heavier than anything I'd felt before. Every mistake in training now felt magnified. Every question I asked seemed to mark me as inexperienced. Every interaction reminded me that I was the new guy, the kid, the one who hadn't proven himself yet. Lieutenant Commander Reeves had been particularly hard on me during my first weeks with the squadron. He'd push me harder in debriefs, question my decisions more aggressively, and hold me to standards that seemed impossible to meet. I'd come close to requesting a transfer more than once, convinced that he simply didn't want me in his flight. It was Captain Wilson, one of the more senior pilots, who'd pulled me aside one evening and explained what was really happening. "Reeves isn't trying to break you," Wilson had said, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. "He's trying to forge you. Every pilot he's hard on either becomes exceptional or requests out. The ones who stay become some of the best aviators in the Navy. He sees something in you, Anderson. That's why he's pushing. The question is whether you're strong enough to push back and prove him right. That conversation had changed my perspective entirely. Instead of seeing Reeves's criticism as personal attacks, I started viewing them as challenges to overcome. I studied harder, flew more precisely, asked better questions, and gradually began to earn not just his respect, but the respect of the entire squadron. By the time that October morning arrived, I'd been with the unit for 4 months and had finally started to feel like I belonged. Little did I know that everything was about to change. We launched at 0545, 4 aircraft screaming into the grey dawn sky. The feeling of catapult launch never got old. That violent acceleration that pressed you back into your seat with crushing force, 0 to 150 miles per hour in 2 seconds. The ocean below was a dark slate, white caps barely visible through the morning haze. As we climbed to our assigned altitude of 20,000 feet, I focused on maintaining perfect position off Reeves's right wing. The Super Hornet responded to every input with precision, the engines humming their powerful song behind me. Everything was textbook perfect, until it wasn't. Razor flight, this is Hawkeye. The voice of the E-2 early warning aircraft crackled through my headset. We're tracking 2 fast movers bearing 0905, range 40 miles, heading directly toward the strike group, designating as hostile. Weapons hot, repeat, weapons hot. My breath caught. This wasn't a drill anymore. Real hostile aircraft, real threat. My hands tightened on the stick as Reeves's voice came through, calm but with an edge of tension. Razor flight, battle formation, prepare for intercept. Stay tight, stay disciplined. We're going to push them back according to engagement protocols. We accelerated, pushing through Mach 1, the coastline falling away behind us. My radar showed the 2 contacts clearly now, moving fast, vectoring toward what would be an intercept point in less than 3 minutes. Standard doctrine was clear. We approach in formation, Reeves makes radio contact warning them off. If they don't comply, we demonstrate force posture, escalating only if necessary. It was designed to be measured, controlled, predictable, but as we closed to 20 miles, something felt wrong. The hostile aircraft weren't behaving like anything I'd studied in training. Instead of maintaining course or turning away, they were executing a splitting maneuver, one braking high, one braking low, both still driving toward the carrier group, but now separated by 5,000 feet of altitude. It was a classic pincer movement, designed to divide our attention and response. Razor lead, they're splitting, I called out, stating what everyone could see on their displays. I see it, Razor 4, maintain formation. We'll take the high threat, 2 and 3 will handle the low, Reeves commanded. It was the book answer, the expected response. Split our forces to match theirs, maintain numerical parity on each threat. But something in my gut screamed that this was wrong. In that split second, all the tactical discussions I'd obsessed over during training, all the historical combat studies I'd read late at night while my classmates were out drinking, all the simulations I'd run in my head during countless hours of thought exercises suddenly crystallized into a clear picture. If we split our formation, we'd lose our numerical advantage on each threat. The hostile aircraft could then engage us piecemeal or worse. One could keep us occupied, while the other slipped through to the carrier group. The traditional response played right into their strategy. Razor lead, request permission to execute a vertical bracket maneuver, I transmitted, my voice steadier than I felt. There was a pause, 1 second, 2 seconds. Negative Razor 4, maintain formation and follow assigned targets. But I was already running the calculations in my head. If I pulled up hard now, gaining altitude rapidly while maintaining forward momentum, I could position myself above and behind both hostile aircraft. From there, I could threaten both simultaneously, forcing them to react to me instead of executing their planned approach. It would break formation, violate direct orders, and probably end my career. But it might also be the right tactical decision. The ocean was a blur below us. The hostile aircraft were 15 miles out now, still driving in. My flight leader was beginning his turn to engage the high threat. In 10 seconds, we'd be committed to the standard response. In 10 seconds, the opportunity would be gone. I made a decision that would change everything. Razor 4 braking high, I announced, already pulling back on the stick and jamming the throttles forward. The Super Hornet responded instantly, the nose climbing toward the vertical as G-forces slammed me down into my seat. The world tilted, ocean becoming sky, sky becoming ocean. My G-suit inflated, squeezing my legs and abdomen to keep blood in my brain. as we pulled through 5, 6, 7 Gs. "Anderson, what the hell are you doing? Get back in formation." Reeves's voice was sharp, angry, but I was committed now, climbing through 30,000 feet, the aircraft shuddering slightly as we pushed through the transonic region. "Razor 4 has tallied both hostile aircraft," I reported, my vision narrowing slightly from the sustained G-load, positioning for simultaneous engagement. At 35,000 feet, I rolled inverted and pulled the nose down, converting altitude into speed and position. Below me, I could see both hostile aircraft clearly now on my displays, and more importantly, they could see me. I was above them, behind them, in perfect firing position on both. My threat indicators showed they were reacting, their radar systems suddenly focusing on me instead of the carrier group ahead. "Razor 4 is engaging," I called, knowing this was either brilliant or insane, possibly both. I selected the higher aircraft first, got tone indicating my simulated missiles had locked, and called Fox 3 to indicate a simulated launch. Then, rolling hard, I brought my nose to bear on the lower aircraft, got lock, and called another simulated shot. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the exercise controller's voice came through. "Splash both hostile aircraft. Razor 4 has killed both targets. Exercise complete." The silence that followed was deafening. I leveled out, breathing hard, suddenly very aware of what I'd just done. I'd broken formation, ignored direct orders, and executed a maneuver that wasn't in any standard tactical manual. The fact that it had worked didn't change the fact that I'd committed a serious breach of military discipline. "All Razor aircraft, return to base," Reeves said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "Razor 4, you're with me in the commander's office immediately upon landing." The flight back to Oceana was the longest 30 minutes of my life. The morning sun had burned away the fog, revealing the Virginia coastline in crystal clarity. The beaches looked peaceful, civilian life carrying on below, completely unaware of what had just happened miles offshore. I went through the landing checklist mechanically, trapped the wire on my first pass, and taxied to the line in a daze. Commander Sarah Mitchell was waiting in her office, along with Lieutenant Commander Reeves and 2 other senior officers I didn't recognize. Mitchell was in her mid-40s, with 15 years of fighter experience and a reputation for being fair but unforgiving of those who endangered their wingmen or broke the rules. She stood behind her desk, arms crossed, as I entered and came to attention. "At ease, Lieutenant Anderson," she said, her voice giving nothing away. "Tell me, in your own words, what happened out there." I took a breath and explained my thinking, the tactical assessment, the split-second decision. I didn't make excuses or try to minimize what I'd done. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Reeves looked angry, his jaw tight. The other officers were unreadable. "You broke formation and ignored a direct order from your flight leader," Mitchell said flatly. "You executed a maneuver that put you in a position where, if this had been real combat, you would have had no wingman support. You made a decision that, by all rights, should end your career before it really starts." She paused and I felt my stomach drop. "And you also perfectly identified and exploited a significant weakness in our standard intercept doctrine." I blinked, not sure I'd heard correctly. Mitchell turned to one of the senior officers. "Captain, your assessment?" The captain, who I now recognized as the carrier air wing commander, leaned forward. The kid's tactical instinct was sound. The hostile aircraft were executing a splitting maneuver specifically designed to defeat our standard response. By gaining altitude and positioning himself to threaten both simultaneously, he denied them the ability to exploit that split. It was aggressive, unorthodox, and frankly exactly the kind of adaptive thinking we need pilots to develop. Reeves spoke up, his voice still tight. "With all due respect, sir," he ignored orders and broke formation. "In real combat, that kind of individualism gets people killed." "In real combat," the captain replied, "following predictable patterns gets people killed. The enemy studies our doctrine just like we study theirs. They count on us responding in standard ways. What Anderson did was unpredictable, and in air combat, unpredictability is often the difference between winning and losing." Mitchell held up a hand. "Lieutenant Anderson, what you did was simultaneously one of the most insubordinate and one of the most tactically sound decisions I've seen from a junior pilot. You're going to receive a formal reprimand for breaking formation and ignoring orders. That goes in your record." My heart sank. "You're also going to work with our tactics development team to formalize what you did into a trainable maneuver. We're going to test it, refine it, And if it holds up under scrutiny, we're going to teach it to every pilot in the air wing. I stood there, trying to process what I was hearing. A reprimand and a commendation at the same time. Punishment and recognition. It was the most military thing I could imagine. Over the next 3 months, my life became a blur of briefings, simulations, and test flights. The Anderson bracket, as they started calling it, was put through every scenario the tactics team could devise. We discovered that it worked best in situations where hostile aircraft were attempting to split our formation, and that it required the pilot executing it to have excellent situational awareness and aggressive energy management. Not every pilot could pull it off, but for those who could, it provided a powerful tool for dealing with an increasingly common threat tactic. The testing process was exhaustive and sometimes frustrating. There were days when the maneuver failed spectacularly in simulations, when senior pilots questioned whether it was worth the risk, when I doubted whether I'd actually discovered anything useful or had just gotten lucky once. But the tactics development team, led by Commander Mitchell herself, kept pushing forward. They brought in pilots from other squadrons, ran computer models, consulted with weapons systems experts, and gradually refined the concept into something that could be reliably taught and executed. What emerged was more than just a single maneuver. It was a new way of thinking about air-to-air intercepts when facing opponents who were trying to exploit our standard responses. The Anderson bracket became part of a larger tactical framework that emphasized adaptability, aggressive positioning, and the willingness to take calculated risks when the situation demanded it. Fighter aviation had always been about more than just following procedures, but now there was formal recognition that sometimes the best response was the unexpected one. The formal training program was developed by December. I found myself standing in front of rooms full of pilots, many of them twice my age with 10 times my experience, explaining the maneuver I'd essentially invented by accident. Some were skeptical, others were intrigued, but they all listened. The reprimand in my record meant I wasn't up for any awards or special recognition, but that was fine. Seeing the tactic I'd developed being integrated into actual training was better than any medal. Lieutenant Commander Reeves pulled me aside one afternoon in January as Virginia Beach shivered under a cold winter rain. We stood in the ready room, watching grey clouds roll in from the Atlantic. He was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "You know, Anderson, I was ready to recommend you be grounded after that stunt," he said. "I thought you were a reckless kid who was going to get someone killed with that kind of cowboy thinking." "And now, sir?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "Now I think you're still a reckless kid, but one who might actually understand air combat better than some of us who've been doing it for decades. You saw something we all missed because you weren't locked into the way we've always done things. That's valuable, but it's also dangerous if not tempered with discipline and teamwork." "I understand, sir. I'm still learning." "We're all still learning," he replied. "The day you think you know everything is the day you become a liability in the cockpit. Remember that." By spring of 2019, the Anderson bracket was a standard part of the tactical training syllabus for fighter pilots at Oceana. I'd flown dozens more missions, each one building my experience and confidence. The other pilots in the squadron no longer looked at me with skepticism. I'd earned something that couldn't be given or awarded, their respect. Not because of my age or my rank, but because when it mattered, I'd made a decision that proved to be right. Standing on the same tarmac where I'd stood that foggy October morning, I watched a new class of student pilots arriving for their first day with the squadron. They looked nervous, eager, uncertain. One of them, a kid who couldn't have been more than 19 or 20, caught my eye and nodded respectfully. I nodded back, remembering what it felt like to be in his position. Commander Mitchell's words from my performance review echoed in my mind. Aviation is about more than following rules. It's about understanding why those rules exist and knowing when the situation demands something different. What you did showed tactical creativity and courage, even if it also showed a lack of discipline. The key for your continued development is learning to balance all three. The sun was setting over Virginia Beach, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The ocean stretched out endlessly, the same water where everything had changed for me months ago. I was still the youngest pilot in the squadron, still had more to prove, still made mistakes, but I was also the pilot who'd seen something others had missed, who'd taken a risk when it mattered, and who'd contributed something real to the way we approached combat. As I walked back toward the ready room, I thought about all the young pilots who would come after me, who would learn the Anderson bracket as just another tactic in their arsenal, probably never knowing the story behind it. That was fine. In military aviation, tactics evolve. doctrines change, and what matters isn't who gets credit, but what keeps pilots safe and effective in combat. But for me, that October morning would always be the moment when I stopped being just a kid in a cockpit and became a real fighter pilot. Not because I broke the rules, but because I understood when the situation demanded something more than following them. That's a lesson that can't be taught in any classroom or simulation. It has to be learned in the sky, in the moment when everything is on the line and the decision is yours alone to make. I was 19 years old when I accidentally invented a new combat tactic. I'm 20 now, with years of flying ahead of me, countless more lessons to learn, and challenges I can't yet imagine to face. But I'll face them the same way I faced that morning over the Atlantic, by trusting my training, respecting my teammates, thinking critically about the situation, and having the courage to act when the moment demands it. The fighter pilot's life isn't about glory or recognition. It's about being ready for the moment when it matters, making the right call under impossible pressure, and constantly striving to be better than you were yesterday. That October day taught me all of that in a way no instructor ever could. And as I looked at those new student pilots, nervous and eager on their first day, I hoped they'd find their own moments to learn those same lessons. Because in the end, that's what makes us better pilots, better service members, and better leaders. Not the moments when we follow the rules perfectly, but the moments when we understand enough to know when something different is required. That's the difference between competence and excellence, between surviving and winning, between being just another pilot and being someone who moves the profession forward. The sky was darkening now, stars beginning to appear above the Atlantic. Somewhere out there, the carrier strike group continued its patrol, protected by pilots using tactics both old and new. And tomorrow, I'd be back in the cockpit, ready to learn something new, to face new challenges, and to continue the never-ending process of becoming the best fighter pilot I could be. That's my story. Not a story about being a hero or breaking the rules for its own sake, but about being ready when the moment came, having the courage to trust my judgment, and learning from both the successes and the consequences that followed. It's a story I'll carry with me for the rest of my career, a reminder that sometimes the youngest voice in the room might see something everyone else missed, and that's a lesson worth remembering, whether you're in a fighter cockpit or anywhere else in life.